Hello, Gray Hat Conference, and welcome to the ICS4ICS panel brought to you by the ICS Village, where we try to put ICS to as many things as we can. So this is a really cool panel because this is still a bit of a new concept. A lot of folks were still talking about industrial control security, and this idea was Megan Samford's, who came up with this concept of Incident Command System for Industrial Control Systems. So that's ICS4ICS. When she was working at the state of Virginia, Megan was instrumental in dealing with the benefits of an incident command system that was there to deal with disasters, both natural and otherwise. And she came up with this structure on how we could deal with these sort of major incidents affecting industrial control systems, where we can bring external resources to the situation in a timely and effective manner. Megan, if you could start off with introductions.
Sure, and thank you very much for having us today, Bryson, and thanks for the audience attendees dialing in to check out this program. So, as you mentioned there, kind of earlier in my career, I was leading critical infrastructure protection for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I did train and learn on a system called Incident Command System, and within that, whenever there were hurricanes or natural disasters or floods, I would report into the State Emergency Operations Center to attach into what's known as command staff to directly support the governor's office and the state coordinator of emergency management and in making decisions. And it requires tons of state agencies coordinating together that don't necessarily work together too terribly much on a day-to-day basis, especially as it pertains to response, as well as over 130 localities throughout the Commonwealth that each have their own emergency manager. So with that, you need a system to coordinate these various resources, and then on top of that, bringing the private sector into play. And as the critical infrastructure protection liaison, 85% of my audience base was the private sector. It's a well-known statistic that the private sector comprises 85% of the critical infrastructure out there, and so we needed kind of a plug-and-play way to run responses with them. And that's how I knew that you could apply Incident Command System to be able to more effectively work with the private sector. And later in my career, when I worked at GE and Rockwell Automation and now Schneider Electric, leading their product security program, I said there is definitely a way that we can apply what people apply every single day in regular natural disaster responses. They apply this concept and framework every single day. It easily can and should be adapted to the industrial control systems arena when it comes to cyber attacks, where there is physical and real-time kinetic impact. And I will say that Incident Command System is not just kind of a US-centric thing. Very similar frameworks are used internationally that look, if not are exactly congruent to what we call Incident Command System here in the United States under the National Incident Management System. So that's kind of my very high level overview, but there are certainly folks on this panel that are more applied practitioners that use the framework every day that I would invite to speak up and kind of share their 2 cents on anything that I probably missed there. So Kevin, I know that you're on the line if you have anything extra to add.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for the concept. I'm all in with the Incident Command System for the industrial control systems. Again, mixing my ICS, right? So coming from the public safety emergency management world, where our worlds have crossed before, way back when we were going to school for Homeland Security. And you're right. It's a process. It's some forms. It's book stuff, and then it's in reality. How do we work with people with different patches at different levels to click together so we can, in the public safety world, wildfire, public health, which is being used to your point now, when people see COVID drive-through testing or really the wildfires, they are heavy in, or should be, Incident Command System use to plan and coordinate. And again, it's a process. It's not just forms. It's not just a prescribed book that we try and open that's 600 pages long. As we know, that's not an actionable thing, right? And so in reality, it's a way to know who's in what position, what's that position do, what forms. Yes, I don't think we can get away from forms probably even in 2020. But people will come to find out, hopefully, as they adopt this concept, which again, I'm all in, those forms will help drive it. And so for me, I got into the incident command system and incident management teams really proper as a public health emergency coordinator. I'm not upset I'm not in that space this year. A little different, right? A lot of work. But really, once I saw it, was just all in, totally nerded out, ended up becoming a credentialed planning section chief, which is like the game show host, the project manager of the process, of the team. Hey, everyone, we're meeting at this time. Do you have this or that? Getting all the forms. So all about it. Other parts of my background, I was a hospital corpsman in the U.S. Navy, so I have some medical background, a firefighter, EMT, but really pertinent to here and what I hope to share with the folks that have dialed in and listening, or hopefully no one's on dial-up. That would be a tough thing. But here on the call is how does this apply across all those areas? Because it does, right? It's not and now traditionally though it did, right? The incident command system, a little history, started out in California. It was wildfire, military based. Only public safety used it for the longest time. It was thought, no, we are the only ones that can use this. And then all hazards, meaning police fire on the street, public health, public works, public utilities, cybersecurity, right? Utilities started to use it and realize, wow, this system is pretty straightforward once we break down our silos, right? Get all of us together and realize, there's no egos here. And if we follow the process and work together, it's a good deal. So maybe if I touch on just kind of the concepts, and if folks that are listening or watching, just picture, and I like to break things down and I'll kind of summarize it at the end, but particularly organizations, right? So the incident command system, to me, there's two notable things. There's a plating P, which we won't, I think, quite get into, but literally it's a P with boxes in it that's do this, 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 and this. And then an organizational chart, right? Boxes and lines. I like pictures. They keep it simple for me. So if you think of the top, there's 4 boxes at the top. One's the incident commander. That's your Dwight Eisenhower leading the Normandy invasion, right? They're in charge. The buck stops with them. That's it. Got to have a safety officer, particularly in public safety. They're the ones that say, we're your flotation device within 10 feet of the water, or perhaps don't visit these websites because then they'll steal your, as we get into this. So again, another applicable, and I know we'll get into examples of how it's applied. Our public information officer, those are the folks that are going to keep the media off of us or help us get the message out through the media. And a liaison officer, how are we all working together? Do we have contacts for all the people that we're working with? Are we get along? Are we not getting along? So those 4 positions, the incident commander, public information officer, safety officer, and liaison officer are the command staff. So they are, all officer positions. And again, the buck stops with the incident commander. As you would think, the terms, that's another good thing, I think, Megan, to the point is, like, it's pretty straightforward. When I see the incident commander, it's pretty obvious, like, what their job is, like they're commanding the incident, right? Another good thing about incident command is it's very incident focused, meaning something happened, bang, or somebody broke in, or someone's bleeding. We show up and we have to respond. But by far, the most practice and the most benefit we'll get early is use this when there's not an emergency, right? So it's easy when there is an emergency. And so this works for events too. It's the exact same process, forms, all that. Down the org chart, we're going to go to kind of 4 big boxes. And again, this is the standard, but you make it work how you want to. So the planning section. So this is where I lived. It's just like being a project manager. Really, the game show host is the best analogy because you're really coordinating the whole process. The incident commander is in charge, but your job as the plans chief is to know it inside and out, and honestly help everybody else through the process. Because not everybody wants to be in planning. Most people in the street want to be in operations because it's sexier. And they're on vehicles that go woo-woo and they have guns and all that. But without the process, none of that gets anywhere. And so in planning,
I think we lost Kevin.
Yes.
Yep.
Maybe.
Do you want to throw it over to somebody else while we wait for? Look, this is our chance. Incident commander, what do we do?
Absolutely. I'm going with
live exercise.
I'm going with American Electric Power. I'm going with the utility that's currently deploying this. So Steve, take it away. Steve, you might be on mute. There you go.
I am muted.
Yep, there we go.
Okay. try this again when I'm not muted. Thanks, Megan. Yes, I'm the Chief Security Officer for American Electric Power over cyber and physical enterprise-wide, and we're one of the largest electric providers in the U.S. We do practice incident command system. The unique thing, or the interesting piece, is I've been AEP 20 years. I came from the Air Force Computer Emergency Response Team prior to Cyber Command and all that stuff, responding to events. So I came to AEP, built a response plan in 98 at AEP. So it's been there forever. Utilities use incident command system to respond to storm recovery and all that stuff. So we're practiced in how to do ICS. The interesting twist was, since security bridges across the entire business and the company, getting us to move over to ICS opened the door to other business functions to use incident command system. And I could better leverage all the people across the business that know how to leverage incident command system, know what it means to be an incident commander, the planning chief, what they do. So it took a little while to convince me. This was several years ago, but eventually I came around, and there's huge value that we are seeing, because I can touch people across the company and pull them into some of these roles where they don't have to be a security expert, but they can help with as a planning chief or other pieces, communications officer, or things that we need specific talents, and it isn't a security position anyway. So a huge value in that. It has been a success for us, and we're using the incident command system structure today. It's actually been running for several months since the pandemic started. AEP instantly stood up a command structure. I ended up as one of the incident commanders over business functions, and we have an area commander managing the whole thing on a daily basis we meet. So that has been a success for us, and like Megan said, we're practicing this and living it, and it is working for us very well.
That is very cool. Have you heard of other utilities? I mean, you don't have to name anyone, but if you had to put a percent on the number of electric utilities that are using incident command system or something that looks very similar to it, what would that number be?
It's probably still fairly small. Not a lot of people have come around. They were stubborn like me, or they thought they knew how to do incident response. They've been doing it for forever, and that conversion seems intimidating, because when you look at all the documentation from ICS, it looks intimidating. But once you start and get involved with it and start practicing it, it makes a lot of sense. And getting them to understand that everybody else in the company already knows how to do ICS. It's the security team that may not know how to do it yet. So it was a convincing time for us, but I don't think a lot of our peers are doing that yet and have really bridged into this to leverage it fully.
Gotcha. Does it give you peace of mind? I wonder this. Does it give you peace of mind knowing that if there was a national outage, that I mean, clearly you would be asked to be coordinating with DHS and FEMA and DOE and other entities. Does it give you a level of comfort, or were there discussions when you wanted to introduce this idea to the security folks that you, in a sense, would be speaking the same language as the government and be interoperable? Was that part of the sell?
Yeah. So that was actually, I reached out to some of my friends in the FBI and others, because we collaborate with local, state, and federal government on a regular basis for security stuff. But when I reached out to them and said, if we have an event, you guys already practice this, right? And of course he agreed. So that helped me come along a little more, because now like you said, I can feel comfortable if there's a major response and I get help from DHS, which I will, being the largest transmission provider in the US. They're going to show up to help me probably if we have an issue. They're going to understand and now be able to plug them into places and make them useful to be able to help me without the cyber skill sets that we may or may not need. So definitely valuable.
That totally makes sense. And I don't think that we had gotten to round out our introduction, so it's probably a good time to bring in our kind of tried and true incident responders, do this stuff every day. We have Neal Gay from Mandiant, and so he's in the private sector doing this. And we also have our our chief from CISA that runs their incident response division, and I think a few other divisions now, Mark Bristow. So, hey, Mark, I don't care which one of you all goes first. Neal, if you want to go first, and then Mark, if you want to round it out on introductions and just kind of your 2 cents on it, we can go from there.
Hey, Megan, thanks for the invite, and Bryson, also thanks for the invite to participate today. I think I'm kind of in an interesting position with incident command system and industrial control systems today, both in my career and volunteer life. So I started out my career as the traditional engineering route, ended up as a statistical quality control engineer, was writing ladder logic in plants, doing serial interfaces, stuff like that, old school stuff. As the manufacturing industry kind of headed overseas, I figured I was either going to move overseas or move on. So I moved into more traditional IT, domain controllers, things like that. It was a pretty good experience, but I got bored with it pretty quick. And so I jumped over into security. I was working for AT&T at the time. So I jumped over onto the security team. From there, it was a very rapid pace jump from there into government contracting, into being a federal employee. And the next thing I knew, I was building out SOCs and responding to APT incidents back in 2008. Since that time, I've probably responded to 30 or more cyber intrusions from nation state groups. I've helped kick them out. I've helped find them. It's been a really, really fun career. And now, funny enough, recently FireEye decided to build an MDR service around the industrial control systems. And we've always had a consulting practice there, but we decided to build a team around that. And they came down and selected me, and it's kind of the convergence of my career as an incident responder going back to manufacturing. On the personal side, I'm a volunteer in what's called the Civil Air Patrol. It's a U.S. Air Force auxiliary organization. So we're the guys that when a plane goes down in the United States, the Air Force tasks us to kind of fly around in our Cessnas and find them, basically. We have actually been using the incident command system as far back as I can remember in Civil Air Patrol, probably since it came about. It's been really useful to us because we typically plug into state organizations or federal organizations, and our entire structure inside is built that way. I'm a credentialed CommT or communications technician. I'm also a mission pilot. That's not a FEMA ICS role, but I use it to help plan missions. We routinely talk to people. It's an interesting tidbit here. In 2012, I actually coached a Cyber Patriot team. So it's a high school cyber defense competition thing. So I coached 7 kids in Burlington, North Carolina. And since that's what the cadets knew, the kids knew the incident command system because Civil Air Patrol taught them that. I said, hey, we're going to structure our team based off FEMA ICS. Right, totally not knowing what Megan was doing or what she was thinking about. It's kind of an interesting kind of convergence there.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so they took to it really good. It worked really well. We had defined incident commanders for each of the operational periods, and we tried to lay it out real slick. It actually worked. We ended up finished second nationally in the competition, so I was pretty proud of them for that. But today, obviously on the front lines of ICS incidents, we can definitely see a need for this because no more of the days of, hey, a domain controller is infected or the CEO's machine has been hacked. Nowadays, you're going to have potentially destructive effects. And how are you going to coordinate cyber incident responders trying to get forensic data from inside of a plant or inside of a site with on-scene responders who are trying to put out the fire at the same time? And I think FEMA ICS is a great way to pull all those people together and get people using, at the bare minimum, common terminology, and it's going to set up really good communication pathways.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, so I'm Mark Bristow. I am the branch chief for cyber defense coordination inside of threat hunting in the cybersecurity division in CISA, the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency. There will be a test. This is all acronyms because I'm the government. That's why I have the most boring background of everyone. Yeah, that's your government at work right there. So I've been around DHS for quite some time. I started here in 2008. Before that, I did penetration testing in critical infrastructure, mostly electric power. And before that, I dabbled at working for Honeywell. So some of the experience systems that you're running out there still have some Mark Bristow code in it. So good luck with that. I wasn't the best developer in the world. So I've been around control systems for a lot of my life and been here at DHS doing incident response. I was the chief of incident response and management when ICS CERT was here. Then I was the director of the Hunt Incident Response team, and now I'm in my current role. So, the industrial control systems ICS has been something near and dear to my heart for a long time. And then, of course, the FEMA ICS, which when you're talking to FEMA about ICS and you mean control systems, you got to spell the whole thing out, just for the record, because they think the other one. I volunteer as a emergency search and rescue teams back in the day, and then got myself certified through FEMA to be an incident commander on the kind of physical consequence side. I think ICS4ICS, I'm really excited about this project. I think we've already made a lot of headway on it. We've still got some room to go, but I think that we've gotten off to a really great start. I'm really excited as somebody who sits at kind of the national level when it comes to cyber incident response. And I've worked, basically, if you've heard of a major incident, I probably had some level of play in it when it comes to industrial control system cyber incidents. Everything from little tiny ones to big ones. Like a couple years ago, a lot of the work we do we can't talk about, but what the Russians trying to hold the electric power system at risk is an example of some of the stuff that we're doing, which it was a multi-entity. There were like 30 some odd potential victims across lots of different sectors. And so, I have a lot of experience coordinating these kind of big events from like a national perspective. And one of the challenges we have in the cyber domain is that we don't really have a similar thing to the incident command structure for how we actually handle cyber incidents. And I think the incident command system really has a lot of things that we can learn in cyber. And I think there's some things that we need to backport from cyber into the ICS to apply to that domain. But it's a really great framework for how to structure an incident response. And it's tried and true. I mean, it's been used in ICS for decades. And a lot of those principles are really apply. And I'm excited if we can get this well out there and adopted and have a lot of people certified, or at least understanding of how the ICS4ICS is structured, because I'm one that supports a lot of other people. And when I walk into a new, to partner with a new organization that maybe we're doing a victim notification on, we're not speaking the same language in most instances, right? And those organizations have completely different lexicons and contexts, and they structure differently. And if we were all kind of working from the same baseline, at the end of the day, it'd make my job easier because I could just communicate much more effectively and provide better support from that natural level. So I think it's a really great project. I'm excited, Megan, that you asked us to be part of it. And I think it's going to be something that's going to really change how we handle incident response and control systems for decades to come, just like the FEMA one has stood up for a really long time.
So that was a great introduction and coverage on ICS4ICS with the ICS Village. See, we can also be as redundant as you can, Mark. And coincidentally, in the timing with going back to what Megan had said earlier, on the ICS Village podcast, Hack the Plant, we just dropped the episode this week with Dr. Reem Al-Shamari, who is the CISO of Kuwaiti Oil. And one of the big components that she talked about was all of the regional collaboration for them to being able to respond to things. So if this is such a great idea, and you all have, of course, brought together different perspectives on that, why hasn't this already been implemented? What are those next steps? Where are we today?
So I can go first, and then everyone on this panel is serving in a leadership role in guiding and framing this effort. Why wasn't it done before? I think that's the first thing that anyone would likely ask. I believe that cyber responses in large organizations largely grew from the IT department, and the IT department, I'd say, would not have necessarily had exposure to traditional emergency management unless they were being brought in and or they were IT departments from local, state, or federal entities that would have had to learn what incident command system is. So I think the way that cyber response planning grew out of IT, quite frankly, would have never known to build off of this construct. The IT, when these events happen, and especially during, I guess, the late 90s, early 2000s timeframe, they would have been in a reactionary mode where pretty much the CEO or the head of your organization is saying, you're going to write a plan, and I need this plan in like a week because we weren't prepared for this event. And so people began to borrow what they called incident response playbooks from each other, right? CISOs were sharing information. They were in information sharing and analysis centers. The ISACs were standing up, and somehow the two concepts failed to converge, or they did converge, but IT and cyber have always been treated as this very unique thing that you're not going to be allowed to play in unless you are an expert or a member of that community, whereas that is the exact opposite of emergency management and incident command system, where what your day-to-day role, as Steve was mentioning earlier, you could have someone that works in finance or regular logistics operations within an organization, but if you're strapped for resources, if they're trained in incident command system, when an incident is formally declared, the incident commander, the planning section chief, the logistics section chief, actually, they can be responsible for saying, hey, you know, we've got 5 people in another department that we've trained and they've volunteered to be a part of this, and or we're going to repurpose them for this incident because we need the resources. They can absolutely make that call within an organization to repurpose those resources during the incident. And while the incident is active and declared, you actually report up through the incident commander. It does not matter who your day-to-day boss is when you're running an incident. The reporting framework and delegations of authority and the command structure is very clear, that while you're working an incident, you report up to the incident commander. So that's a winded way of saying, I don't exactly know why IT didn't do this before, but I don't think it's their fault. I just think that that's the way that things happened and evolved. But I think that now that the worlds are converging because you see physical and potential kinetic impacts, I think that that is where the two worlds have begun to meet one another, and they're wanting to talk to one another and figure out how can we take the response plans that are already in place in IT, because I can tell you right now, no CISO out there wants to rewrite a 300-page plan that they've been testing on. That's not going to happen. What you can do, though, is incident command system can absolutely still work for you, in that it's an umbrella organization and framework construct that can fit over the plans that you already have. And it really involves typing of the resources that you have. How many malware reverse engineers do you have? 1, none, 5, right? How many do we have across the country? How many do we have in a state, in your company? If you're a multinational company, how many of them do you have spread around the world? That involves typing of resources, knowing the people that you have, their skill sets, the level of skill set that they have, how many of them you have. Operational periods, if an incident operational period, if you're going to run for 8 hours per operational period or 12 hours, then you need to switch people out so you don't get incident fatigue. All of those things are really awesome elements of incident command system. And I feel somewhat flat-footed in this conversation today, and that it's so many cool things where we could literally walk you through what this construct looks like, but we're giving you enough to kind of pique your interest in that you can easily go out and research this and very quickly see exactly what this is all about within org structure.
Who else wants to add to that?
So, Steve, I agree with everything Megan said. And another place that cyber grew out of was DoD, where I came from, right? I came from 90s era Air Force cert, but a lot of the people I know that came out as experts and started feeding into the various industries, we didn't practice incident command system there either. So it's another source of a lot of cyber talent that and they may have changed it now. Obviously, I've been gone for over 20 years, so it could have changed a lot. But so that's another detail. Another piece is, once I was convinced to adapt my incident response plan, which had made it through many audits, NERC SIP audits, compliance audits that nobody wanted to touch because it wasn't broke. It didn't have issues. So why touch that standard? So even after I was convinced, I had to go to leaders across the company and convince them why it was a good idea to change our what you'd call a SIP-8 document. Ours was always enterprise that also did SIP-8, which is the NERC SIP incident response portion of the standard. I had to convince people that it was a good thing to change it over. And the first audit it went through, which was a few years ago, I had to sit with the auditors from NERC, or the regions that were auditing us, to make sure they understood why it was a good thing, because they hadn't seen anyone else do that either. So it was, again, like you said, the fact of changing that response plan, but there were some other aspects that made it even difficult once I was convinced. And I was a stubborn cyber person, just like a lot of them are out there.
Mark, looks like you had something to say.
Yeah, this is a good question. Like, why has the obvious thing not been done before is always a really great question, because I think my fellow panelists here would say that it is an obvious thing, or it's an obvious thing now. I think one of the reasons why, so, obviously when it comes, FEMA is a DHS agency, right? We have a lot of the execution pieces of the Enduring Security Framework, or ESF, are executed out of various pieces of DHS, to include CISA. So we have a lot of this stuff floating around from what we call the consequence management side, right? So like the physical impacts, the hurricanes, those types of things are an important topic here at CISA. What I think, from my perspective, what changed people's perception was that cyber was always something that happened to your bank account, or to your email, or to your, whatever IT systems. And the threat landscape has really changed. I've been doing control systems cybersecurity for a while now. And I remember back in the earlier days, it was hard to convince people that, like, hey, like, if I hacked into your control system, I could potentially do harm to people, right? Like, I could create physical consequence. The people didn't believe that cyberspace could intersect with meat space. And now that we have, a body of evidence and threat actors out there willing to do it, you even have, threat actors willing to take it as far as to, impact safety systems directly with the Triton Trisis activity. People are now starting to really grok much more widely that, yes, these control systems incidents that are cyber enabled can have these physical effects, which ultimately cause safety consequences. And hey, maybe my plans on how I respond to them should at least talk to each other at a minimum, right? And so I think that we've now kind of hit, unfortunately, through real world incidents to some extent, but I think we finally have that intersection where people are starting to realize, I might have a cyber incident, and I got to have my, my malware reverse engineer doesn't really have a role in a consequence management type of incident, but that malware could actually put people's lives at risk. And so I need to make sure that my safety plans are cross-talking. And I think that that's really where you start to really kind of realize that ICS4ICS is really a natural extension of this. And then when you start to unpack it, you start to learn that there's a lot of similarities. There's differences, but there's a lot of similarities, and a lot of deeply learned lessons from the incident command system side that we in the cyber side that are frankly relatively immature as a domain can learn from how the other ICS does this. So I think it's the threat context started pushing that in that direction, and I think it's great.
There's a decent chance Kevin might be able to come back in before this started. Anyway, Neal.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons from my observation point why we haven't gotten to this place yet is because NIST and FEMA didn't talk, right? So you have NIST SP 861, which kind of defines incident response in the cyber world, and then you have FEMA ICS, and they just didn't talk. I think it's that simple. I think those conversations are happening now. As Mark pointed out, there's a lot of cyber incidents now that I'll call cyber physical incidents, where actual consequences are happening. Look at Ukraine, for example, their power went out, and it went out in a bad way, and it was done intentionally. You hear a lot of times in the cyber community, people talk about, especially ICS cyber community, people talk about the big one, right? When is the big one going to happen that's finally going to get everybody's attention? And, those of us that are on the vendor side, sell lots of products and services and stuff like that. And I think the big one's already happened multiple times. I don't think you've had loss of life necessarily, which is maybe why the attention hasn't been there yet. And I think in a way, thinking here today, we're fortunate we haven't had that, because we're actually able, sitting here to plan, hey, how can we get ahead of this problem? So when it happens, we're ready. So I hope everybody pays attention to, things like Ukraine and some of the other incidents that you hear about in the news that really highlight the problem that's going on.
Welcome back, Kevin.
Thank you. Nothing like technology issues on a technology-related call, right?
Well, you turned it into a real-life incident response for us to see what happened, and our incident commander took over. So the question that the group is kicking around right now is everybody, short of where you got cut off, started talking about the benefits of ICS and covering the overview of what that stood for. And the question then was, all right, well, if this is such a great idea, why hasn't this been done already? And what are the next steps of basically what's the current state of the art? And I think he deliberately froze himself that time. You know what? That is the best way to duck a question virtually.
We need to come up with a name for that, for when that happens.
Incident type? Self-denial of service?
A self-denial of service, exactly. I love it. I need to get a Twitter tag for that. But no, that's great. And when we think about the future, in my mind, I can't imagine a world where some type of construct like this isn't in place. I mean, do we really envision that everyone's just going to be running their own incidents on their own? And what's interesting, and I've said this before, is that cyber responders are the only responders in the world that are not interoperable with other organizations or other response groups. I mean, the word responder in and of itself, its very essence, in my mind, should imply some degree of interoperability with other organizations, because while all responses are local, they begin local and they all end local. To the point that Mark and Neal and Steve brought up earlier, these incidents are very rarely what we would type as a type 3 or 4 incident, one that is just local to one entity. These are spanning many companies, many customer vendor relationships, geographic regions, organizations. And so I think that is another important compelling point as to why something like this is needed. When, I find that it's pretty easy to convince people. They're like, yeah, well, notionally, why would anyone be against something like that? But I think in my mind, it's how do we put this together? How do we actually make it happen? How do we enable people to see that it can work? How do we get them started? And so I just want to open it up to maybe Mark and Neal and Steve, folks that are definitely kind of in this to make it happen. What do you all think? What are some big wins that you think the industry needs to see within the next year for this to really take off?
So I'll start. I think one of the big things that I think will be a win out of this is standardizing a lexicon, because everyone has kind of different terminologies, different things. You go from, and Neal can probably appreciate this. You do incident response at an oil and gas facility today, and then next week you're doing it at water, and you got to use completely different terms. Things don't mean the same, right? So I think having a level set there in expectations, and even just what we mean by responder, what we mean by different types of qualifications and the typing effort, I think will really help kind of level set everyone, so we're all starting from the same sheet of music, because that's the fundamental building block that I see that has been problematic is that we aren't all talking the same, and it's very hard to cooperate when you don't understand each other. So I think that is a fundamental thing that will be the initial win. The other thing that I think is really important is that we also make that the bars are attainable. we need to make sure that, if you're going to be a qualified malware reverse engineer, right, we need to make sure that you have that skill, but we also need to make sure that really anyone can acquire that skill. And that's really one of the places where, I'm hoping that CISA can really help with some of this. Is in that workforce development kind of stovepipe. I'm in ops, right? So I don't do workforce development, but the workforce development people are actually excited about this because we can start to have career path trajectories so that we can get people in high schools and middle schools even starting towards goals that ultimately will be things that again, I sit at the national level. So from a national security perspective, will ultimately have impact because, someone from Megan's organization that's a malware reverse engineer type 2 and someone from Steve's organization that's a malware reverse engineer type 2, we actually know what that means, and it has meaning to everybody. And if you're a kid that's interested in pulling apart malware, you can understand what skills you need to attain that. Right. And then we make that skill development accessible because, everyone always talks about the cybersecurity professional shortage. Right. And there really is a shortage of people to do this. And I actually think a lot of those places kind of undershoot how bad the problem is because every organizations need to have some access. They don't necessarily all have to have it. Right. But they have to have access to people with these skills. And they got to understand, are they actually skilled? Right. And make sure that we're at that baseline and know how to put these things together. So I'm personally super excited about the typing piece of this effort because I think that'll really kind of reset the baseline and help us in that cybersecurity skills gap issue that we have in the community right now.
So another thing that might help move this forward is convergence of cyber and physical. The threats, we've been talking about converged cyber and physical threats for quite a while now. Now major, at least in the electric sector, a lot of the major utilities are creating a chief security officer position like mine. And you're bringing in all those physical security people who a lot of them came from law enforcement. A lot of them already understand what ICS is from the law enforcement perspective. So that is another way that convergence may support incident command system and helping people understand the value because people may be convinced because they have people that already know how to do it.
Yeah, one of the things I enjoyed about the credentialing process inside of FEMA is not only do you have to have education, experience, things like that, you have to actually perform it on a mission under supervision of someone that has that job role. So gone will be the days, hopefully, where someone can go get a CISSP and raise their hand on a $100,000 a year job with no experience, right? It's super valuable, and it's not just valuable because you get training and you learn what you're doing. It's valuable as the incident commander or the CEO of a company to know that, hey, you got this type of resource. This person has actually done this before. I think it's going to break down a lot of barriers for a lot of people to be able to go after those types of careers. I think also that a point that Steve made, we have seen on multiple occasions the merging between cyber on the IT side and cybersecurity on the OT side. If you look at all of the major incidents that have happened as far back as we've looked at them, they almost all, except for one probably, had a IT component. They started in IT and got to OT. I think I've been in one company that I have really good confidence that you can't find a pathway between IT and OT. Lots of companies have tried to make it really, really hard, but it's pretty consistent that red teamers find a way through it somehow all the time. And so I think it's really important that the two do merge as quickly as possible. And I think highlighting those incidents may help bolster our case that, hey, IT guys, like, you're one step away from very serious harm here. So come along for the ride and enjoy some of the benefits.
So I'm going to summarize. Neal, you said an air gap is not an air gap is not an air gap. Steve, you highlighted that there's two kinds of organizations, those where they take that kind of security seriously and those where the leadership doesn't. And having that position that highlights that at the C-suite and level does it. Mark, you're going to fix the whole problem because you're government.
Yeah, I'll get right on that after I secure the election.
All right, so we're coming down to the hour here. Kevin may or may not be joining us. I've been seeing his emails as we've been going, and different things keep crashing along the way. So APT Kevin is doing their best. We'll see what happens there. So okay, so this is good. We've got our background. We've got where we are. Where can folks go to get more resources? And I'd like this to be pitched to two levels. One, of course, are the individuals, the engineers in various levels, IT engineers, ICS engineers, those two different groups, as well as anybody who might look at starting something like this in their enterprise.
So I think a lot on the instant command system is out there already. There's FEMA. The instant command system is something that's designed to be ported to a lot of different organizations and at a lot of different levels. You can take it from the national level all the way down to the local level, the individual company level. There's a lot of stuff out there. They have some really great training on ICS. It's like ICS 101 classes that kind of explain the system, why it's set up the way it is, how it's set up at kind of a high level. I think FEMA is a great resource for that. As far as it relates to the ICS4ICS project, we still have a lot of work to do, and we're still meeting regularly to get a lot of the stuff done. But one of the things that I'm trying to do, because I am from the government, so I'm here to help, is try and is be the bridge between this group and FEMA, so that ultimately we can get some of the work that this group has done into the kind of main FEMA system, so that it's all in that kind of one place, and then that stuff will be publicly available, and people can go out and look, hey, I want to be an instant commander someday. Well, what is that going to take? There will be, hopefully in the soon time frame, a place you can go and actually get that information, right? So you can see, how does the system work? What are the basics of it? Some of this, a lot of it's like web-based training. So it's stuff you can do at your own pace if you want to learn, and then make that, available to basically the whole internet.
So I would also say that if you have a desire to have a voice in this effort, and if you have thoughts around it, or if you just want to be along for the ride to craft and learn about the policy along the way, definitely reach out after this, and we can get you hooked into our monthly meetings. That group continues to grow month over month. And we've got international participants. We've got participants from the private sector, nonprofits, government. I mean, we've got kind of all different flavors, all different types are participating, which is super cool. Lots of diversity of thought. The ISA, Global Cybersecurity Alliance, is also helping to shepherd this. So it is being backed and kind of endorsed with the weight of the IEC 62443 standard for industrial control systems. And so I think the point that was brought up on NIST, like 62443, I think is going to go down this route. So that's going to be awesome, and that you're seeing all of these standards converging on this concept right now, because quite frankly, I don't think enough had been done speaking to industrial control systems response activities before. That's kind of flipping the page. We're speeding up on that. And really, to me, and some people, they may have their own opinions about this, but I said, we've got to get our first set of folks credentialed. In other words, people, once they see that, hey, I've got a skill set, I've been working in cyber 2, 3, 10, 20 years, maybe even 6 months, wherever. We want to find a place to slot you and credential you, so that that if an incident happens, you can volunteer to help other companies. Hopefully your company is going to want to adopt a structure like this, so you'll have a place in it. In other words, everyone has a role, and everyone's role is respected, and everyone is allowed to play their role. And really, for me, whenever I've run incidents, whenever I've been in IC, that has been how we run responses. And I think that, again, once people see that they can have a role, and they're going to shine and see the successes from working in a construct like this, it's organically going to grow on its own. But the credentialing, I think, is our next big piece, followed by the templating of plans. And by the way, today you can go on FEMA. You need a response plan. You need a continuity of operations plan. You need a tabletop exercise template that you just plug in and fill out. It literally all exists. It blows my mind the fact that people don't use the resources that are available to them. I can't tell you how many times I've used these documents, right? But definitely check it out. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out as well. So.
Neal?
I'm just going to give a plug here to FEMA for the training they put up there. Yes, some of it is PowerPoint training and it's kind of boring stuff, but the information is actually good. I think at the end of most every module you take a test. So it kind of confirms and validates and gives you a certificate that you completed it. It's good for continuing education units, by the way, if you're doing your CISSP or things like that. So just a plug for FEMA there. Great job, and there's a lot of good resources there.
Steve?
Sure. Another bonus that I can think of that should convince people in corporations that are considering this is there is a very good structure on communication to your executive team and leadership communication. So I've managed events in the past where I had a whole bunch of executives sitting behind me or calling me on my cell phone asking what's going on, what am I doing, how bad is it, or is it a real threat or not? There's a structure where those people should not be standing in the back right behind you in your office or in the operations center. They have their own path to getting briefed and updated. So I think that's something that helps anyone that's done response for a major event. It helps you convince on you can manage the event and not have to manage communications.
Megan, you get the honor of final remarks.
I think it's pretty much all been said. At the end of the day, we want people to become involved. So really, it's just a call to action to the community, especially the ICS Village community. You all will play a tremendous role in helping us in reviewing this and telling us, quite frankly, where we're wrong, where we're making assumptions that aren't going to fit into our community. And that's the type of feedback that we want. So I'd say I'm trying to remember the old FEMA adage, like, get a plan, stay involved, something like that. But I can't think of a very good tagline right now for ICS4ICS. But I'd say just reach out and check out what we have going on and be a part of the conversation and take your FEMA training. Go ahead and get credentialed. I think they would like it. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Megan, Mark, Neal, and Steve, and what little of Kevin that we saw in absentia now. And look forward to future discussions at other conferences.